Hello darlings and welcome to another historical tutorial. Today we'll be making Edwardian shoe polish. In this video I'll just be making the shoe polish and then I'll make a follow-up video later on the correct way to use it. So make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. So for the shoe polish recipe, or shoe blacking recipe as it's also called, I'm using How to Make and How to Mend, which was originally published in 1900. This book is a reprint from 1915, but I can't imagine it changed all that much. This book has 4 recipes for shoe blacking. The first one is one that I'm going to do. I want one that's actually black polish and one that's clear. So this first one includes lamp black. It also has a lot of ingredients that you probably have to buy in specially nowadays. The second one I'm not going to do because it uses hydrochloric and sulfuric acid, which I'm not as comfortable using such strong chemicals in the home nowadays. The third one also has lamp black in it, so I'm not going to do it, but it does use a lot of household items, so if you want to take a screenshot and try it by yourself, please do. It uses brown sugar, sweet oil, which is olive oil, and then half a pint of beer. And then I'm going to try the fourth one as well because it's clear. So it just uses tallow, hot flour paste, moist sugar, and warm water with gum arabic. Then for the follow-up, I'll be using this book, The Bachelor Girl's Guide to Everything, which was published in 1916. This book is a reprint from 2008, but I'll be using that to display how to correctly use the shoe polish. So these are the ingredients needed for recipe number 1. We are going to need some mutton suet, we're going to need some beeswax, some sweet oil, which according to the Googling that I've done was most commonly olive oil, but it could also refer to other oils, so I'm using rapeseed oil here. Sugar candy, which we're going to make by ourselves in a second, which is very fun. Gum arabic and lamp black. You can also get gum arabic in powdered forms, so I'm not sure what they're referring to, but I'm going to try it in liquid form and see if it works. And I got the lamp black from a paint supply shop. I had this tallow to hand because I use it for my Georgian hair supplies, so I'm going to be using this for both recipes even though they require suet and tallow. So if you're only going to make one recipe, you can buy in specifically what you need. I'm just going to use this because I already have it and I don't want to spend more money. This recipe also includes turpentine, but I haven't bought it in because this recipe includes enough ingredients, and I've also bought these two specially, so I didn't want to spend any more money. But if you do want to use turpentine, just be aware that it needs to be stored in a safe place because it is very flammable if you do decide to use it. For both of these recipes, you'll also need metal tins to store the shoe polish in. I got these little tiny ones off eBay. We'll see if they're big enough. So I'm going to make my own sugar candy. You can buy it if you go to, say, World Food Shops. It seems to be used a lot in Indian desserts, but I'm going to try making my own, which you know is quite historical to use what you have on hand. We're only going to need 1 dram of this, so that's 1.8 grams, which is basically nothing. So I thought that I'd make my own, but it will take a while. So it says it takes about a week for it to set. So if you do want to do this, you have to do it at least a week in advance before making your shoe polish. So what I have here is I have a saucepan to melt my sugar in. I've got granulated sugar. I've got a jar, which is going to have to be left out. I have a wooden spoon for stirring, some string, and something to hang the string from. Also, if you're using string, you need something to weigh it down, so I've just got this little paper clip here. I would also like to mention that I did look for recipes for this and for example the hot flour paste in the How to Make and Mend book, but it didn't have any of the recipes in it. I think that's because these recipes were so obvious back then that they didn't feel the need to be written down because they were so easy and everyone knew them, which makes it very difficult for me, the modern interpreter, because unfortunately these recipes have kind of been lost to time. I can still find tutorials online, but they're just not quite as obvious as they would have been, say, back in the Victorian era. So, following Betty Crocker's tutorial, I'm going to add 2 cups of water to this saucepan, and then I'm going to put it on over a medium heat. Once it's boiling, we can start adding the sugar. While I'm waiting for the water to heat up, I thought that I'd prepare this. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this string dangle because that's what the sugar crystals are going to attach to. So I'm going to use this little paintbrush as a stand. So I'm going to tie the string to about the center of this. Just do a couple knots. And then apparently you want it to be about 2/3 of the way down the jar. So maybe about here I'll cut it. Yeah, that looks good. And then to weigh it down, we'll add a little paper clip, but apparently we need to soak this in sugar first, so I won't do that just yet. Okay, I'm happy with that. Back to the water. This water is boiling now, so we are going to add 4 cups of sugar. I don't know, this is all the sugar I have, so we're going to use all of this at least. And we're going to add it. The Beshi Kropka website says about 1/2 cup at a time, and keep stirring it until it dissolves. So we'll start with 1 and do about 1/2, and then use a wooden spoon to stir it. And we're going to keep doing that until all 4 cups have been dissolved. So I'll come back to you once I've done that. That is all 4 cups added. It's kind of gone a bit milky and quite thick and syrupy. Beshi Kropka says to give it a roiling boil before taking off the heat and cooling. So I'm going to jank the heat up for a little bit until it's really boiling and then take it off the heat. Right, that is boiling quite vigorously, so I'm turning the heat off and I'm going to leave it to cool for apparently 20 minutes, but it might be a bit longer. While we wait for that solution to cool, we can just prep this string. So we just want a tiny bit of sugar. And I saw one tutorial say that you should dip it in water and then roll it in sugar, but the tutorial that I just looked at now said that you should dip it in the solution and then roll it through the sugar, which I think makes more sense. So I'm going to, on the paper, yeah, I'll take it off of the paintbrush and I'll leave the paper clip on here, I think, because I think it'll probably be quite good if it gets sugar on it. This doesn't feel very food safe, but if I was doing this to actually eat, I'd use like a wooden skewer or something. There are so many tutorials online. So I am currently, you can't see, but I'm dunking this string in the solution, getting it nice and saturated. Okay, now I'm going to roll it in the sugar a little bit. Make sure it gets nice and covered, because this apparently will act as an anchor for the sugar crystals to attach to. All right, is that nice and sugary? Looks nice and sugary. And then this one says keep it straight as well, because I'm guessing the sugar hardens and solidifies quite severely. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'll just keep it in this plate until it's time to put it in the jar. Right, it's been 20 minutes. I read that it's quite important to warm the jar up before putting the solution in. So I've just rinsed it in some hot water and we are going to go for the pour. Apparently it should be room temperature when you put the string in, and this still feels quite hot, so I'm going to let it cool down for a bit longer, then I'll put the string in. So it's been about 1.5, maybe 2 hours, and it's finally cooled down to room temperature. These instructions always say like, oh, it takes 20 minutes to cool down. It always takes a lot longer than that, at least in my experience. So I'm lowering the string and the paperclip covered in sugar into the solution, and I will put it on the side over here and we'll see how it goes. I will come back to you in a week and see how it's going. So I have set up a bain-marie situation and I'm going to add the ingredients into the pot here. I'm not sure if that's what you're meant to do. I'm not sure if you're meant to melt it directly into the pan, but we'll see how this works. Right, so we are starting with recipe 1. So that starts with 4 ounces of mutton suet, so that's 113 grams. Oh, that's actually quite a lot. Ah, 113. It calls for 1 ounce of beeswax, so that's 28 grams. 1 ounce of sweet oil. In this case, I'm using rapeseed oil. One dram of sugar candy, so that's 1.8 grams. Really is a tiny amount. Let's just go for 2 grams for ease. 1 dram of gum arabic, so that's another 1.8 grams, so let's just do another 2. This is also when you would add turpentine, but I'm not adding it to this one. And then the final step is to add lamp black to suit. I'm not quite sure what that means, so I'll just start with a tablespoon or so, and then, I don't know, see how it looks, I guess. So I'm just waiting for everything to combine. I remember from doing the Georgian hair products that beeswax takes quite a while to melt. Also, this sugar candy is kind of sticking to the bottom. So I'll come back to you once it's all melted together and we'll add the lamp black. So this is the lamp black. It is very, very pigmented as I expected. I've already got it all over my fingers. So we'll see how much we need to add. I'm going to start with a small amount first. So that is everything dissolved. The sugar candy took a long time to dissolve, to be honest. So I wonder if it would be better to just use plain sugar. I don't know. But let's add a little bit of lamp black and see how that looks. Start with just a little teaspoon. About that much. Okay, that's looking pretty good. But I think we need a bit more lamp black. Let's just do another teaspoonful. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. The consistency is very runny. I wonder if we added turpentine if it would be a little bit thicker. But because all of the sticky stuff we added was in quite small amounts, most of this, to be honest, is the suet, which you can smell. So let's decant that into tins. I was worried when I started out that these tins would be too small with the amount of mutton suet that there was. But there was surprisingly little of everything else. So I think maybe half of the tins that I bought should be alright. Okay, let's try to make not much mess, shall we? I need something with a spout. And a tip for cleaning beeswax out of things is to first clean it before it gets too cool, and secondly, if it does harden, then just use like boil kettle, pour it in and use a scrub brush or something like that, and it does get rid of the beeswax. Otherwise it can be a nightmare because it really does stick on. Right, let's see how this works. Ooh. That's all 5 tins filled. There's still a little bit left, so I'll find something to decant that into. But I'm happy with how these look so far. Look, it's so cool! And the beeswax is already starting to harden on the nozzle here. So I've got to deal with this quick. So the shoe polish has hardened. As you can see, the lamp black has kind of just stayed in clumps and made like a little constellation in the tin. I didn't find another receptacle to put this in, so I just put it in an old yogurt pot because I didn't want to pour beeswax down the sink. But as you can see in this, the colour is kind of more strong. So maybe next time, as I was pouring it into the tins, I would like keep stirring it to make sure the lamp black was kind of all the way through rather than all just lumped in the bottom. But it looks good, and I'm excited to use it to see how it works. I wanted to give you some tips about cleaning after the massive faff I just had while cleaning. So to start with, make sure that you're using stuff that you don't want to use for food later, because all of this is quite sticky and also not necessarily food safe. So it doesn't really matter with the pan because you're not actually cooking anything in it this time. But with the bowl, try and use one that you're not actually going to use for cooking later. You can just buy a cheap one. And my top tips for cleaning would be, first, if there's any left over, pour it into something that you can throw away, because you don't want to pour this kind of beeswax down the sink and clog up your sink. Secondly, what I would do while it's still hot is just go around the whole bowl with something disposable, like a paper towel, and just kind of collect up all that you can in one go and really try and, you know, clean it out of there with this disposable thing. And for the last round, if there's anything sticky, if you have any of those like just little sponges, use one and dispose of it afterwards. But use a lot of dish soap because it's quite greasy and dish soap is made to like cut through grease. So put a lot of dish soap on it and just kind of do that final swipe round with it. And that should mean that everything's clean afterwards. The lamp black really sticks and the beeswax and the mutton is really greasy. So overall it's a nightmare to clean up, really. But I've given you all the tips I can and I hope that you don't make as much of a mess as I did. So now we're on the second recipe, which is actually recipe number 4 in the book. And I'm going to start by making a hot flour paste because it needs a bit of time to make and then cool down again. So we're going to start with 1 cup of water and get it everywhere and start heating that up. And then 2 tablespoons of flour. 1 and 2. And then we just want to whisk it in and keep stirring until it kind of cooks off and becomes a paste. So when I was looking for this recipe, I found that it was mainly used for paper mache nowadays. So this is the kind of glue that you use for paper mache. And I'm assuming that hot flour paste in the Victorian era is the same thing. Okay, that is looking quite thick and pasty. So I'm going to decant it into a bowl so it has a bit of time to cool off. Okay, so I've set up the same situation as before, a bain-marie, so a pot full of water with a bowl on the top. We want to start with tallow the size of a walnut. Now I have a feeling that a walnut is going to be bigger than I think, so I'm using a big spoon to start. What about the size of a walnut? It might be a generous walnut, but that's fine. Next we want to add 4 ounces of moist sugar. Now I'm guessing that moist sugar is literally just sugar and water. So I've just added some water to a pile of sugar and we need 113 grams. Then we need to add quite a lot of hot water. So it says warm water, we need 1 quart, which is basically 1 litre or 2 pints. And we want 1 tablespoon of the hot flour paste. Then for the last step, it just says a little gum arabic. So I'm going to just do a splash, the same as last time. I'm worrying at this point that this was maybe too much water and maybe a quart in the Victorian times was a different amount. So I'm going to double check that. But I'll let that cook off for now, because at the moment it just looks like a mess. Right, I've been heating this mixture for about 20 to 30 minutes, a lot longer than the previous one. And as you can see, the amount of water means that it's basically just water with some like stuff in it. And I just can't see how that's ever going to set. So I've reread the instructions and I'm thinking that maybe this one doesn't need to be heated. So I'm going to try it again, but just mix it in the bowl and see how that works. And maybe not add as much water, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm just going to try the whole thing again, but not heat it, just do it at room temperature. So I've tried with all the ingredients at room temp, and as you can see, now the hot flour paste is just kind of sitting on the top. Nothing's mixed correctly. I even used boiling water instead to see if that would help instead of just warm water. And it's just not doing anything right. So I think we can call this recipe a pronounced fail. Maybe the shoe polish was just never meant to set and it was meant to be watery and meant to use it like straight away. Or maybe something was written in the recipe wrong, which I never put past Victorian patterns. But this one I just can't figure out, so I guess we're just using the first recipe. So after reading through the instructions again, I noticed that only the first recipe involves melting the ingredients together and then pouring it into a tin to cool afterwards. All the rest just say to mix things together. So I'm wondering if maybe the rest are meant to be used just on the spot. They're not meant to be kept like over time and they're not meant to set really. Perhaps. Because I'm looking at the other recipes as well and they all are quite liquid based. They probably wouldn't like thicken up in the same way that the first one would. I probably should have used my brain when I was reading these instructions, but you know, you live and you learn. So maybe I should have tried the fourth one just kind of as was, but I wasn't very pleased with the consistency and I also wasn't ready to polish my shoes just then. So I'm glad that I did it, but I don't think I'll be making that recipe again. But I am still very pleased with the first recipe that I did. The only thing that I would do differently next time, I would probably leave it on the heat after putting the blacking in for a bit longer and stir it in more thoroughly. And then, as I said at the time, I would also mix it as I was pouring into the mold. Or if I was using one big tin, I think that would have also fixed the problem. Although to stop all the lamp black from just sitting on the bottom, I think stirring it in would make sense, even if you are using just one big tin. But overall, I'm very pleased with the result and I'm looking forward to trying this out, so subscribe and the next video will be trying out this shoe polish on my shoes. Give this video a like if you liked it and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. See you next time.